Hi, in this video we'll be discussing important information on Martin lighting adjustment and calibration of the effects systems. The process of adjusting several functions of a fixture and calibrating them so there is no visible difference in the product's light output may be necessary from time to time after it has run for several hours. All products have been adjusted and calibrated prior to leaving Martin, but when the parts have been changed or the fixtures have been in operation for some time, calibration may be required. This training will discuss methods of adjusting and calibrating some of the effects. In the event it is necessary to change out an old lamp to fit a new one, lamp adjustment may be required to obtain an even beam of light. It's best to use a large white canvas where the beam can be projected on and set up the fixture 8 to 10 meters from the canvas. You'll want to look for the hot spot and flatness of the beam. If you don't have a beam analyzer, a good tip is to use a mobile phone camera to detect the hot spot and center it as shown in the images to the right, while you attempt to remove the dark shadows or spots using the screw adjustments on the fixture shown in the bottom center image. The dimmer plates are used to block out the light. Installing these correctly and ensuring that they are perfectly flat is very important, as any curvature in the blades could allow light to escape and cause heat-related problems. In situations, while on site, where the dimmer blades need replacing, the likelihood of having an exact 3.25 mm spacer to place between the blade and the module plate is unlikely, so it is recommended to use something of similar size until a more accurate spacer can be obtained. Always ensure that both blades reach the end stop. Although accuracy is desired, but not possible at the time, make sure the dimmer blades are slightly spaced apart, touch their end stops comfortably, and are not touching each other. If the driver board has been replaced, it is very likely that the error DINA will be displayed. There are two different ways to calibrate the dimmer. The first process described here represents the official version, which references factory distance specifications for correct measurements. The second process consists of the use of a sheet of paper placed on the front of the lens. The fixture should project a nice zigzag pattern of light on the paper. When you want to calibrate this, you can modify the value once in the calibration menu and adjust it where necessary. The images show a small amount of light coming through the blades in that same pattern, where they are crossing with a slight gap. This is what you are trying to achieve. Martin uses a color mixing that is based on a graduated cyan, magenta, and yellow filters. Each filter subtracts one of the primary colors, that is red, blue, or green, from the white color. When changing or installing CMYC flags for the color mixing module, it is important to keep the orientation of the flags in the same order as installed from the factory. Martin's utilization of stepper motors within the product range has given the fixtures the ability to have precise control over their position. The stepper motors are used to drive the effects by making precise incremental movements of a fixture. The recommended process for installation of the static gobo wheel can be reviewed in the user's manual. It's important to note, for the D-shaped motor shaft, it can be tightened on the non-flat side of the shaft, but the frisbee isn't being secured correctly. For the set screws, also known as grip screws, it's suggested to apply Loctite to the threads, but it's actually best to use as little as possible. Using too much can cause the screws to get stuck, making it possible to round off the heads when trying to remove them with an Allen key. The static gobo wheel effectively gets placed on its holder in part of the process. It's important to align the gobo wheel holes with the frisbee holes so that it can be locked securely with the lock ring. In referencing the images of the three motors, for the rotating gobo wheel, it should be pointed out that each one has a different spacing specification. The components of the rotating gobo wheel system layer together for removing or installing in a specific order, starting with the gobo wheel adapter at the bottom as shown in the image. The adapter for the motor shaft sits atop the gobo wheel adapter. The rotating gobo wheel gets placed on the adapter for the motor shaft and held with a snap lock ring. Finally, the sun wheel is retained on the adapter for the motor shaft by the use of torque screws. Installing the gobo in the correct orientation is extremely important, as one side is coated and the other side is not. When handling the gobos, always wear cotton gloves to prevent grease or finger marks from getting on them. Once the gobo wheel has been installed properly, it is good practice to verify the reflective side is facing towards the lamp and the gobo holder magnet is in line with the gobo index mark. On some Martin and other manufacturers' products, there is not always an index mark on both the gobo and the gobo wheel, so aim for this where possible. It's always good practice to line up the gobo holder with the magnet and the magnet with the inside of the gear, so when turning on several lights at the same time, they will all be in the same position without having to do any indexing. In most of the Martin products, and particularly the Viper, all of the belts are self-tensioning, so adjusting the drive belt is very easy. When adjusting belts, a simple rule of thumb for checking the tension is to rest a screwdriver on the belt. If you can fold it in halfway, then that's perfect tension. If you can spin it too far, then it's too slack. If you can't twist the belt at all, then it's too tight. The only exceptions to this rule are pen and tilt belts, which are slightly tighter because of the weight they carry. It is recommended that you point all gobo holder magnets towards the inside screw as shown in the image. Alternatively, if you're in a hurry, then it is recommended that you point all magnets inward towards the blue wheel. On the iris mechanism adjustment, there is a required spacing of 0.3 millimeters shown in the bottom image. This spacing is just off the top and bottom of the surface, which is enough to allow the arm to move freely. Standard practice for calibrating gobo wheel 1 and 2 and the static gobo wheel is to place the fixture 5.53 meters from the wall. This is based on an ideal circumstance, since a lot of rooms or areas where the fixture would be placed is not always an option, so get as close as possible. Once the fixture is in place, it can be powered, so calibration can be performed. When you have determined which gobo will be calibrated, proceed to the menu to make your selection. Make adjustments to focus the beam, and adjust the iris as the slide references. Always reference the manual for correct procedures on performing these processes. This concludes this service training. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.